Hi everyone, my name is Alanis, and I work with the Park Research Group over the summer. I work primarily with Michael Rivera and Shahidul Islam, who are both graduate students. And Dr. Hyle Park is the mentor of Park Research Group. And the topic I studied over the summer was the structural examination of peripheral nerves using optical coherence tomography and 3D image reconstruction. This is quite a bit of information. If you look at the title in itself, you won't know what most of it means. So by the end of the presentation, I hope that you guys, if you guys see most of this terminology, you have some sort of familiarity with it. So what motivated us to actually do this project is that, in everyday life, you're walking down the street, you cross the street, and a car drives by, but it doesn't stop entirely and hits you. Or if in your backyard, brick lands, hits you. That's actually called a blunt trauma, which is when a foreign large object hits your body. And when that happens, it could also cause nerve damage. And if the nerve damage is severe, it can actually pinch your nerve and could actually cause nerve degeneration. Similar to if you have a string, you wrap it around your finger, and from the point where you wrap the string around your finger, it dies off. Cells from that point to the extremity die off. Similarly with the nerve, if you pinch a nerve, it starts to die off from that point onto the extremity. And as the nerve is degenerating, it also causes degradation of the myelin. And what's important about that is that when myelin degrades, myelin is the conductor, the insulator of the nerves, which helps conduct electrical activity throughout your nerves. So as the myelin starts to degrade, so the electrical activity that goes to the nerve starts to also decrease. And to the point, if you don't have a lot of myelin, the signal won't be as strong. There are also demyelinating diseases that can occur. You can either be hereditary or you can acquire them through vitamin B12 deficiency. And it also causes the same things. And the problem with the nerve degeneration is that it can only be assessed through electrical conduction methods, which could either be invasive or non-invasive. But you won't be able to find out how damaged your nerve is until the damage is pretty severe. So it would actually be pretty helpful if we were able to assess the myelin in the nerve before the nerve actually goes to that last stage. So one of the main goals of this project is to be able to provide a more accurate and less destructive method of identifying damaged nerves, such as assessing myelin, and also to study the structure of the nerve as the changes are incurred through demyelination. One of what we used for our research was the peripheral nerve. A peripheral nerve is the nerve that is not part of the central nervous system, so the nerves in your arms, your hands, your feet, your legs. And primarily we use the sciatic nerve of a rat. The reason why we used this nerve was because the dimensions of that nerve are pretty similar to dimensions of the nerves in the human body. So by experimentation on the sciatic nerve, we're indirectly getting information, we're getting data that should be somewhat applicable to humans. This is the nerve anatomy. This in itself is the nerve. And that the neurium is here. And where we expect to see myelin is actually in this area here, in the perineurium. And the myelin actually is the Schwann cell that is around the axon. So as it starts to demyelinate, the Schwann cell actually starts to disappear. So if we want to be able to assess how much myelin there is in a nerve, we have to pay close attention to this. And in order to be able to pay attention to the perineurium, or the axon bundles, we actually have to understand the structural anatomy of the nerve. So by being able to identify that perineurium, we'd actually be able to get a pretty good idea as to how myelinated a nerve is. But another thing that would help us to understand how myelinated a nerve is actually one of the structural features that occur in the nerve, such as the bands of Fontana. A scientist named Fontana discovered this effect, these bands of Fontana, in 1781. And the reason why this is actually important is because the axonal bundle is actually not in a straight line. It actually has certain bends to it. So when you shine light through the nerve, it creates the effect of bands. So what's expected to see is when the nerve, there's no tension on the nerve, there's a certain amount of bandage. And as you stretch the nerve and you cause tension, the bands start to decrease in number. So if the nerve is there's no tension on the nerve, you're expected to see a higher density of myosin in an area as to when the nerve is stretched. So here's an image that was taken by Edwin Clark and J.G. Byrne. And what they did is they cut out a piece of nerve and they shine a light at a certain angle. And this is at 50 times magnification. But the problem with this is that we can't really use this for medical applications because it's highly invasive. You have to cut off the piece of nerve. So there are alternatives for this though. So there are imaging techniques. Some of them are already applied nowadays in medicine. But for our project, we actually decided to use optical coherence tomography, which is, the acronym is OCT. The reason why we chose this was because of its high level of resolution. It's not as narrow as other techniques, and it's not as broad. So it gives you a pretty close range that you can see small structures, but you don't see necessarily only a certain part of it. You can actually see a segment of what you're looking at. And also, because it's capable of because it's capable of imaging up to a depth of 2 to 3 millimeters into molecular tissue. This is actually pretty handy for both in vivo and ex vivo imaging. And the way OCT works is you have a broadband source of a certain wavelength that's in the packet of light to a 2x2 splitter, which then separates that packet of light into 2 identical packages, and one of them goes to the reference arm, the other one to the sample arm. At the reference arm, you place a mirror and you get back a certain amount of light, which then is taken to the detector. And the sample arm, as the light is shined through the sample, it reflects back and gives back a certain amount of light, which is then used. Our detector is a custom-made high-speed spectrometer, which then grabs both the information we got from both the reference arm and the sample arm and gives us certain data, which we take and we use it for post-processing. And after the post-processing, we get a final image. So the project goals for the summer for me were to create 3-dimensional volumes from these 2-dimensional images that we got using optical coherence tomography, and also to extract structural features of peripheral nerves using OCT, such as the epineurium thickness and the bands of Montana. The way OCT works when you're scanning a sample is that, this is the nerve, you have the OCT sample arm here, and you shine the packet of light onto it, and it only scans a certain cross-sectional area of it down to the axis. So through raster scanning, it scans through in this direction, from left to right, and you get a depth perception image. So, but post-processing, what it consists of is using MATLAB and AMRA. MATLAB is a numerical computing programming language that mainly used for manipulating, plotting data. And what we used it primarily for this research was to create 2-dimensional cross-sectional images from the data obtained from the detector. And AMRA is the 3D visualization software that's actually specialized in visualizing, manipulating, and analyzing scientific data. We used AMRA specifically to create 3-dimensional volumes from the 2-dimensional images we got from MATLAB. This is the basic layout of MATLAB, the command window, previous commands, and here's the layout of AMRA. Here you have your 3-dimensional volume. Here you place your images and it'll stack them into a volume. And here are the properties for this, for whatever you have in here. This is what a post-process imaging using MATLAB, you get this type of image. And the thing is, one of the programs we have in MATLAB forces the data that we get from OCT into a matrix of certain dimensions. In this case, it's 2048 by 512. And each one of the values that are inside the matrix are actually, we force them to be an intensity value from 1 to 256. 256 being the brightest, and 1 being the darkest. So here you can, well, since we scanned it, we have here, well, this will be the nerve, and the rest of it will be air. The actual dimensions of this, supposedly the sample is 2 millimeters in height and 5 millimeters in length. And once we scan, as we pass through the sample, we get a series of 2-dimensional cross-sectional images. And this is what it would look like if you process it in MATLAB. It's only 2-dimensional images, which doesn't give us a really good idea as to what our sample looks like. So this is where AMRA comes into play. By stacking together, you're actually able to get a volume. So by looking at the volume, you can get an idea as to what the nerve looks like or your sample looks like. But the problem with this actual volume at the moment is that you can't really tell where the nerve is at. So through manipulating the volume, in MATLAB what we do, since the image is made from a matrix, we actually make the air a certain value. And whatever's inside the nerve, if there's some value similar to what the value of the air is, we change it so that way it'd be one less, and all the air a certain value. So then through AMRA, we make all the air invisible, and which would give us only the volume of the nerve itself. And having accomplished this right here is my first goal, which was creating a three-dimensional image from two-dimensional cross-sectional images. But what about the other two goals that I have, such as finding out the epineurial thickness and the Vance Fontana? Well, as I mentioned before, as to the type of image that we have it's an intensity image. And the thing about that is that in intensity images, the more light is reflected through backlight scattering, so as the light shines onto the sample, it reflects the light back. So the darker the coloration is, the more light is reflected. And as it's passing through what's expected for us to see from the images, the two-dimensional image, is that as light shines through here and is reflected, if we plot this image, we're expected to see a certain spike here in the amount of reflection. And as it's passing through the epineurium, we expect it to remain somewhat constant or slowly decrease. And once the epineurium ends, it goes past the epineurium, another spike, which marks the end of the epineurium. So technically, this here should be this right here. And you might think, well, how is that true? Well, this right here is supposed to be the epineurium. And if you put it together with the plot, the surface of the epineurium should be right here with the graph, similarly. So as the light shines through, there's a drastic change in light reflected. And as it's going through here, it slowly goes down. And once you reach the end of the epineurium, it spikes back up. The thing, we can't see the epineurium here due to the lack of resolution we have. So we're unable to clearly see or even see at all the epineurium. And we hope to see later on to be able to actually see the perineurium inside. And with this, being able to see the epineurial thickness, that actually accomplishes my second goal. But what about the Vance Fontana? Well, remember how I mentioned how if you scan a sample using OCT, you only scan down one plane? So if you get only two-dimensional images, you wouldn't be able to see the Vance Fontana because it's a three-dimensional feature. So unless you use, that's where AMRA comes into play as well. And that's actually where it makes it more important. Because without AMRA, you wouldn't be able to see these bands. Since we're able to slice through any direction throughout the volume, through X, Y, X, Z, Y, Z axis, you're able to slice at any angle you'd like, and this is how you're able to also see the bands. And you're also able to animate the volume, in which you can actually see the bands more clear through a video. And that's what this video is about. Here you can see the bands. The little ripples that appear, those are bands. And so with that accomplishes my third goal of being able to identify the Vance Fontana. And what we hope to do later on, future work, is quantitatively characterize the Vance Fontana and the epineurium thickness, and to also replicate what we did with intensity images to polarization images. And in conclusion, throughout the summer, what I learned to do is how to use AMRA, reconstruct three-dimensional volumes from two-dimensional images. After sufficient post-processing, we're able to identify the epineurium of the Vance Fontana, and this is also one step forward towards us assessing the amount of myelin within nerves. And I'd like to acknowledge the Park Research Group, particularly Dr. Park, for helping me out and orienting me throughout the whole process, to Shahidul and also to Michael for also guiding me throughout the whole process, to the Department of Bioengineering, the CCRAA for the funding, and also, since June is the coordinator of the CCRAA, he'd also be part of that. So thanks to June for giving me the opportunity to participate in the program, and also for the NIH for the funding for the lab. Questions?